All right. Hey, BTB buddies. We are live. I'm happy to be here. And as usual, I'm drinking Liquid Death water, Liquid Death mountain water. It's in a can, not a bottle. And I really enjoy it. I like Liquid Death. And, I hope they keep me on as a permanent sponsor because if they don't, it's the last time you're going to see one of these. And if they keep me on as a sponsor and you're watching me Liquid Death, I'll just keep buying this shit and drinking it. So there you go. Good stuff. Liquid Death. I have gotten a couple messages from people who say that they think that my glasses are a prop, and they are not a prop, and they are not anything ironic. I moved to Alabama, and the plant life is attacking my eyes, so I can't wear contacts anymore. And I picked these glasses out all by myself. My wife did not help, and so that's why they look like they do. They're not a prop. So enough of that. So I am pretty stoked tonight because I got somebody on that I've wanted on for a long time. Um, uh, this guy, he won a comedy contest when he was in college, and that gave him his first chance to go perform at a comedy club, and got kind of bitten by the old comedy bug. And then while working, he kept doing the comedy, and then finally decided to kick it and go full time after a while. And now he's become a huge hit. The latest special came out on Amazon Prime called "Where the Field Corn Grows," and now it's a hit on YouTube. He put it on YouTube, and now it's going crazy there too. And not only that, but he's got a Drybar special, "How to Get Out of a Blind Date," that's out too. So he's all over the place, and I can't wait to bring him out and let him know how I discovered him. So that's gonna what we're gonna do first. Greg
Hey,
Warren,
Scott, how you doing, man? Yeah.
thanks for being on the show. I'm really stoked, and I think the first thing I need to do is explain how I discovered you because honestly, before I was told, I didn't know who the hell you were. So,
Huh.
so but my wife said, and I'll try to do one of your voices. I'll try to do my wife as somebody from Iowa or something like that. Yeah, that Greg Warren fella is fantastic. He's on the Bob and Tom show, and really love him. You need to get him on the podcast, dummy. Just do it. So that's me trying to do a voice. It's
Sounded
not
just
very
like
good.
her. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Anywho, but yeah, and then it was like so soon after that the your special came on, and I got to tell you, I'm a critical watcher of comedy, and it takes me out of just enjoying the show. You may get into this too, but it just totally takes me out of the show so many times when I'm trying to pick out what they're doing right and what they're
Sure.
doing wrong. And with yours, I just got sucked in, and with
Oh, thanks, man.
the voices and the natural anger at yourself and those around you and the observations, it just totally sucked me in, and I had to rewatch it critically, and then I listened to it critically, and I couldn't find anything to criticize you about. So
I'll
really
give you a
really
few
good
things,
stuff.
man. Yeah.
And the one thing that really pisses me off that my wife introduced me to you is you totally ruined my plantar fasciitis joke
Oh, yeah.
that I never got to tell because it's so much like yours. There's no way I can tell it. And plantar fasciitis, it's a funny word. It's a good word for comedy, and I have it, and it just sucks because your foot just burns and hurts, and you don't know why. And the exercises and stuff, they don't work, and then all of a sudden it just goes away. And
Right.
then as quick as it went away, all of a sudden it just comes back in full force. So I've had it like 3 or 4 different times, and nothing really makes it go away except for itself. It just decides to leave for a while.
Uh, yeah, man. That's one of those things that I think with most joke writing, for me, when something happens it's not necessarily funny, or you don't make the connection. A lot of stuff I've done, it's like, that's just something that happened and I was annoyed with
Mhm.
it, or, or it's a part of my life that's an annoyance. That's plantar fasciitis God, it's just, it really affected me for a very long time. But, and then one day you're in the notebook and you're like, what happened yesterday? What happened 2 weeks ago? What happened 3 weeks ago? What's
Yeah.
going on in my life? And you're like, well, there's this plantar fasciitis thing. Is there anything funny about that? No, there's nothing funny about it. It hurts. And then you're sort of like, then you sort of get into the little details of it and see if there's a seam somewhere that you can exploit. And
Right.
it took a while, man. Like there's probably, another 5 minutes that kind of got left on the table where I was like, that's funny, but maybe it's not funny enough. And then
Yeah.
it's weird because then you go back and you're like, what was I doing? Like that other 5 minutes was really good. I should have stuck with that too. And,
Right.
um, but yeah, I've had a lot of bits like that, especially lately, where it just, God, I've always said it's really hard to write comedy, or that's a stupid thing. Of course it is, but it's when you sit down and say what's funny to me, nothing. Usually, nothing is
Yeah.
funny, and
Uh-huh.
then I sort of start. Okay, what interrupted the continuum of the day? What happened that didn't normally happen? How did I feel about something? What made me feel a certain way? What do I remember?
Mhm.
Um, or then just even if it's like, well, nothing different happened yesterday. Okay, now let's just sort of break down all the normal things that happen and then see if you
Mhm.
can't get within one of those things and break it down a little bit. So you're like, actually, that is, it's when you break it into its parts, there is something significant about it.
Yeah.
Um, Incidentally, before we get going, so Liquid Death is one of your sponsors.
Yeah,
Yeah.
at least for a month, yeah.
Yeah, I know the guy that started that project, or one of the
Oh,
main guys
cool.
there. Yeah, his name's Dan Murphy. His mom is one of my best friends, and she runs the comedy club in Omaha, Nebraska.
Oh, cool.
Colleen Quinn. Yeah, but Murph, I think he's a partner, and it's he's a guy that's very successful in advertising. I don't know where he's working now, some big agency, or maybe he was at Google for a while. He's a
Yeah.
really funny guy, really creative guy. But that's his project. So if you go to the Omaha Funny Bone, you know, that's the only water you're going to get. But it's,
Yeah, the Liquid
it's,
Death,
it's,
yeah.
it's really cool to see that it's out there. Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoy the fact because I've put together like a running skit with me talking to the Liquid Death demon, and that's the thing I put in front of the podcast. And the nice thing about them is I can say anything I want. I try to. I've got one line. They're donating 10% of their profits to clean up past plastic waste to
Oh, cool.
save the fucking turtles. So I can just say that,
Yeah.
and it's really cool, and they encourage it. So
Yeah. That
it's a
sounds
good
like
fit
Murph,
for
man.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. He's a very creative guy. Yeah.
yeah,
Very bright guy. Yeah. Known
yeah.
him since he was a kid. Yeah. That's
Cool.
cool.
Yeah, I've enjoyed this one, and I hope they like me enough to keep me on. But they gave me a month trial, so we'll see how it goes.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah,
Well, I
yeah,
texted, right when you were doing that, I was texting his mom. I was texting Colleen. I'm like, hey, isn't Murph's product Liquid Death? And she's like, yeah, that's it. And I'm like, oh,
yeah,
well, this guy's just plugging it right now. So
yeah.
okay, cool. Yeah.
Small world. One of the things, I mean, the you talked about the birth of the plantar fasciitis joke, but you are so observant. I kind of compare you to Seinfeld in your observations, and you've got one bit that just it made me want to find out if you had to do some research. I'm dining alone. Is it just you? And you talk about the seating chart, and you talk about being in somebody's section,
Yeah.
and you want to move because the sun and all that. And
Yeah.
did you work in a restaurant at
Yeah. Yeah. I
Oh,
did.
yeah,
Yeah.
you work for Denny's, so you understood the whole weirdness of the seating chart and
Yeah. I
all
mean,
that.
I worked at a restaurant called Madison's Cafe in college. I worked at Denny's for a while.
Uh-huh.
But yeah. And then, I eat in restaurants a ton. I spent,
Yeah.
too much. So, it's one of those things you're just sitting there and you're like, what happened yesterday? Well, I was at, often nothing happened except for I had a meal at this restaurant, and
Mhm.
I've I think I've just about, I've just about milked everything out of restaurants over the last 3 albums. Like I'm
Yeah.
I got a new hour that's, it's starting to take shape, and I don't think there's any restaurant jokes in it for the first time. Like
Yeah.
I think I beat that one to death. But, yeah.
Yeah, you did it very well, and I is One Star Wonder your first album? Is that the first one you put out?
Yeah, I mean, sort of. Like I put out an album, when I was probably before I should have put out an album. It was called. I put out 2 albums. One was "Hit 'Em with Your Flute, Greg," and then the other one was one One Star Warrior, and those were like self-released albums. They weren't
Uh-huh.
with a label, and Jack Vaughn was starting Comedy Central Records,
Mhm.
and I think he heard both those and was like, "Hey, man, let's do a real album on a real record label." And that, Jack has
Mhm.
since gone on to he runs Sirius XM Comedy,
Mhm.
but he launched, Comedy Central Records, which was, he launched it. I think he launched it with Mitch Hedberg's first album. He did the same thing with
Yeah.
Mitch. Mitch recorded one on his own, and then he's like, "No, Mitch, let's do one here." And that, one of the greatest albums ever was what launched it. And Jack really sort of, I think he had a lot of influence on what the modern comedy album is, because he was the first
Right.
one to be like, okay, we need to get people on Pandora, we need to do, all these things. And so
Mhm.
yeah, those first 2 albums, if anybody has one, destroy it.
Yeah.
But no,
Well, I was
I mean,
gonna
there's
say
some stuff on there. There's some terrible stuff on there, but
yeah.
I don't know. I feel like yeah, I did One Star Wonder, and then an album called Running Out of Time that I did by myself, and then I did Fish Sandwich, and then Where the Field Corn Grow. So
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say the One Star Wonder, if it was your first album, I've listened to a lot of first albums, and they are normally self-produced, and, uh you're right. Sometimes you're just not ready and you put the album out. This album I felt like was ready. It was another one that
yeah, it was,
I
but
was able just to listen to and enjoy.
yeah, Hit 'Em with Your Flute was not.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some good stuff on there. It's just, but there's also some stuff where I'm like, what am that's, it's not, it's not terribly good. But I don't think I'll ever listen to it. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I can't remember what I think. At the time I was like, it was back when I was Crank Yankers was a big thing on Comedy Central, and I wanted
Uh-huh.
to audition for it. And I did these crank phone call things that were, I thought, really good, and then they were based on real prank phone calls. But
Mhm.
my manager's like, "Yeah, why don't you take the actual prank phone call and then just record a skit based on it so you don't get in trouble." But they're all the skits are based in reality, and like those, I put those on that first album. Those things are pretty good, and some of the stand
Yeah.
up's good, but some of the stand up is, it's average,
Yeah.
and some of it probably wouldn't. I don't know. I think some of it probably wouldn't be all that appropriate for the times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you seem like and correct me if I'm wrong, you seem like a, perfectionist when it comes to getting on the stage and delivering, because I've seen like videos, and some of your stuff crosses over from albums to the Drybar special and stuff like that. So I your delivery seems to be consistent, and it also I also saw improvement from the first time I heard a joke to the last time you did it, based on what I could see and hear. So you seem like a perfectionist, that you'd never feel like a joke's totally baked. Is that
Yeah, I
right?
think so. Yeah, I mean, it's I think I mean, this is something that all comics know. I mean, it's as soon as you put something on a CD or a video special, you'll figure out how to do the joke better about 10 days later. Like
Yeah.
it's just so and I try these days when I try to put an album, I hope none of it is repeated, but earlier
Right.
in your career you sort of have some crossover, and like I said, there's like, well, that's there's this Drybar special that I did, and I didn't even know Drybar was going to be a big deal. It's just a
Yeah.
thing that a friend of mine was doing, and I was like, "All right, I'll do that." And I just, but and I did material off of mostly fish sandwich, and
Uh-huh.
so yeah, so then you do have the opportunities where like most of that material, I was like, this is done. I put it on an album. I'm probably not going to do anything with it. And then this Drybar thing came up. I'm like, oh, cool. Now I get to do these jokes, and I've improved a couple of them since then.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I can do it a little better. And yeah, and then I think hopefully you become just a better, for lack of better words, I think you become a better deliverer or a better
Yeah.
delivery. I think overall, um, I think you just become a better comedian, and your stage presence a little better. Some things. I moved to New York for like 5 years, and I think that really, really helped me in a lot of ways.
Uh-huh.
I think it also was good for me to come back and get out of New York for my style. But
Mhm.
yeah, it really sort of sharpened me up. I think some of the fat fell off of a few of the bits.
Mhm.
And New York really does that to you. You're going up in between some really good comics, and you got to get to it quick, and people are
Yeah.
doing their hits. So that helped me. But then I felt like maybe some of the silliness that I had in some of my bits and some of the character stuff I got away from when I was in New York because there wasn't enough room for it. So when
Uh-huh.
I moved back home, I started working on the where the field corn grows thing, and there was a little more silliness and a little,
Yeah.
some of the character bits, and it wasn't, and there's some stories, and I'm not sure a lot of that material would have worked that well in some of the city clubs.
Yeah. And the act out stuff and the voices and things like that, there's a contrast between how you look and what you emote because you've got like right now you've got a serious look on your face and you start out all of your shows with a pretty serious look on your face, looking a little bit confused and a little bit like why am I here and stuff like that. So it's unexpected that you're going to get as animated as you are and also do the voices and stuff like that. So that's one of the things that drew me in. Is that something that you kind of put together on purpose, or is that just are we just lucky that that's the way you look?
Well, it's interesting you said that. I think I sort of I think a few things are going on there, but it wasn't like I set out and was like, well, this is how I'm going to craft comedy.
Uh-huh.
I think early on in a lot of my bits, sort of, I was either the victim or the straight man, and then I was doing a character of
Yeah.
somebody who's maybe a little more animated and a little more cartoony or silly than
Yeah.
me. So I think that's why that contrasted there. And then I think, a few things work, and you're like, okay, well, that's a thing that I can do. But I do think that me, the version of, when I'm just not in a character, that's probably a little closer to who I am.
Mhm.
I probably do have a more serious face, or I'm maybe a little more laid back, maybe even a little, little defeatist at times. But yeah, but yeah, I think, I don't think it was something I set out to do, but I think you fall into a group, you find where things work, and you're like, okay, well, let's, especially early on in comedy when you're not that good, and you're
Uh-huh.
just like, man, I'm getting killed up here. And then you find this thing where it works, and you're like, yeah, I think I'm going to do more than that.
Yeah.
Like, let's do
Right.
that thing where they're actually paying attention. I'm going to do more of that. And so then you kind of carve out maybe a little bit of a niche for yourself.
Yeah, and you had the opportunity to hone those skills, while you were working, in the real world, and one of the things that I recognize and drew me to your persona of when we popped When the Field Corn Grows Up was I knew there was something about you that was similar to me, and you don't know it until you find out that you were in sales.
Yeah.
And I've
Yeah.
been in sales for 20, a lot of years.
Real
And
what do you sell, or what have you sold?
yeah, well, I started out with copiers,
Okay.
and then I went to IT services, managed services, and now I sell managed security services. So mostly techie stuff.
Okay.
But the funny thing with sales is we're all doing the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah,
And it's a relationship, and if you go buy a car, it's a much shorter relationship, but you're compacting, the getting them on your side and do the emotional buy and stuff like that, and it doesn't matter what you do. There's different longer sales cycles and stuff like that, but you're everybody's doing the same thing. So if anybody thinks they're in a better class of sales, that's not true.
no, it's I think there's some differences, I think, because when I first got the job, I worked for Proctor Gamble. I sold,
Yeah.
in their food beverage uh, sector, which it doesn't exist anymore. But
Uh-huh.
products like Jif and Duncan Hines and Crisco and Folgers, Sunny Delight, Hawaiian Punch. But when I first, went into that business, I think I was out of college and I was sort of desperate. I felt like I needed to make money, and
Mhm.
I, uh, I kind of felt like, man, I'm not this guy. I'm not a sales guy. I'm a little shy when I
Mhm.
don't know people, and I'm not that slick. I'm just not. And I had a used car salesman in mind, which those guys are good. A
Yeah.
lot of those guys are good. And the relate. It's interesting what you said. I keyed in, and like the relationship is very short.
Yeah.
But what I was going into was like, after I got through sort of some introductory stuff, I had a chain of grocery stores, and I had like, a few buyers, and those are my guys. There's
Mhm.
no other business. I have Kroger Cincinnati and Kroger Columbus. That's like, 300 or 400 stores. I have my buyers at those two accounts, and I'm with these guys for 2 or 3 years. How like,
Yeah.
there's some people they're with them for 20 years. Like these are my buyers. We have a relationship. I
Mhm.
can't pull one over on them because I got to walk in there, 2 weeks later. We're in this
Yeah.
together. Or I can't be
Right.
like, you know what? Screw you. I'm going down the street. There is no down the street. Like there's another guy that has the other account down the street. I can't go down the street. So
Yeah.
it's a really, it's really funny. Like I think if you're a buyer, and that's a tough job too, but I
Yeah.
also feel like it would be an easy way to get a little full of yourself, or and a lot of the guys that I called on weren't. They were bright
Yeah.
guys, but like you have people in front of you that, let's say I call on this peanut butter buyer. I mean, I have to manage the relationship. So a lot of it becomes like it's an argument, but it's an argument that I cannot, if I win, I got to win it and make him still feel like he's the man.
Yeah.
And if he
Yeah.
says something that I completely disagree with, or something crazy, I kind of be like, well, that's an interesting point, Steve.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting point. I'm not sure I see it that way, but I like what you're like.
Yeah.
To be like, I sold Jif peanut butter, and they could say crazy things, Well, I'll tell
Yeah.
you what, Jimmy Carter was a peanut farmer, and I don't care for his politics, so I don't advertise peanut butter. And now a normal person would say, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. What are you
Yeah.
talking? But I would have to be like, I never thought of
Yeah.
that. I actually, I never thought of that. That's a good point. Let's just walk away. I'll come in next week and we'll try something else.
Mhm.
We'll talk about cake mix. you
Yeah.
know, uh, yeah, the next hour that I'm working on has sort of this. I'm really trying to revisit that time in my life, and
Yeah.
if you're, I think if you're in sales, man, it's a little bit like baseball. You are humbled every time.
All the time. Yeah.
And especially probably something like you're selling. It's a big thing. It's like, hey, you might fail 8 times,
Yeah.
but then when you
Yeah.
get that big one, it's like, wow, we just sold them a new system. Things are going
Yeah.
well, and I made my year. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think sales. It's funny because most people are like those guys are dirtbags and
Yeah. Oh yeah.
they're scumbags or whatever. But in a way, it's one of the most honorable professions because you are humbled every day.
Yeah.
Like
Oh yeah.
I have this great idea and somebody just says no,
Yeah.
and there's all these ways to like sort of get past no. And,
Mhm.
most of them didn't work for me. I mean, they had these like, here's how you handle the objection. Well, I remember calling this guy, David Newcomb at Fiesta. He's a great guy, but I mean, the first 6 or 7 times I called on him, I'd do my presentation and David
Mhm.
would either go like this
Yeah.
or that was it. There was no
Yeah.
dialogue. And, and I would be like, I'd be like, hey, I got this great idea on a Crisco oil promotion. He'd go, and I'm trying to go into my training. I'm a good kid.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, they told me, David, I hear you saying, but how does it? That's cool that you're in it, man.
Well, and I really feel like it's the perfect job for getting you ready for stand up because you got a thick skin and you know you're going to fail
yeah.
most times when you first get on stage. You just know it and you don't beat yourself up about it because you know tomorrow's a new day. So it just seems like the perfect job for transitioning into stand up.
Yeah, that's really it. I don't think I thought about that because you're right. There is a lot of rejection. And maybe it did sort of help me get ready for the career. Yeah, I still early on in the stand up, it was so personal when you didn't do well. And I
Mhm.
really beat myself up over it. And I beat myself up over I never beat myself up when the buyer said no, but I definitely beat myself up when I was like, I screwed something up.
Yeah.
Like there's a few times when it's like, we ran out of Crisco oil and it's all my fault because I didn't prepare the plant for this ad, like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's that. I would just be like, you messed up,
Yeah.
but yeah, the stand-up stuff, it was, it still stings if something bad happens in stand-up, but I'm over it real quick,
Yeah.
really
Right.
quick. I
Yeah.
used to carry it around forever.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there any audiences that just don't understand your take on Midwest stuff?
I don't think, I mean, I don't think that my act is particularly difficult to understand.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
There's not, and that's, I think I try to make it accessible. I don't want it to be stupid, but I also don't want to sort of be like, hey, you have to know a few things to get this act. I'm like,
Yeah.
we just have to be a human being that has been alive for a while.
Right.
But you do have to listen. And that is the one
Yeah.
time I think where most stand-ups struggle is if the setting isn't right and they're just not listening, that's a tricky deal.
Mhm.
And there's tricks. I kind of, most of the time I'm not that emotional about it. 'Cause it's like, I know so many tricks now. I have all this material I can draw from. If it didn't work, it probably wasn't gonna work.
Yeah.
Like I kind of like, there's not a lot of moves I could have made because I know them now.
Yeah.
That being said, like now in a shorter set, there was some stuff. There was when I lived in New York. There's a few sets that bother me. That
Mhm.
I'm like, yeah, I failed there. I did not. I think I didn't have maybe not enough confidence and I was not decisive enough and it bothers me,
Yeah.
and part of that made me a better comic, but yeah.
That's got to be tough doing the New York thing because you've got it's different than an open mic where you're there with 20 other shitty comics. You're in there with your peers that you really respect and you want
Yeah,
them to like you too.
sure. You got to that's a thing. And that's the thing that's made me sick a few times where I look back, I'm like, I was trying to impress somebody and that you shouldn't do that. You should just make the audience laugh, stand behind what
Yeah.
what you've written. But yeah, there's great comics there. There's just, great comics that you've heard of that are
Mhm.
very famous, great comics that you've never heard of, that are really strong.
Yeah. What did you, when did you start getting where you felt like you were good at it? The uh, you thought that, "Okay, I'm not shitty most of the time up here. I'm getting to the point where I can do a good 45 minutes."
A good 45. Well, I mean, I think it kind of comes in. So you start off and you're doing open mic nights, and then you're the MC, which you're
Mhm,
doing 10 minutes, and then you're the feature act and you're doing 30, and then you're the headliner and you're doing 45. So most of the time as an MC, it's just hit and miss. It's one of the hardest things to do is open a show. It's a tough spot, and you're the least qualified to do it.
mhm,
People aren't paying attention. They're eating. They don't expect much from you. And I was that for a long time because I had a day job. I was selling
mhm,
peanut butter during the day. So I was doing that at night. And, it was hit and miss. And I started having a little more success towards the end. And then, you know, I worked that day job for 10 years, and I was kind of doing comedy on and off.
mhm,
Towards the last couple of years, I started feeling like, man, I'm getting better at this. Like I'm getting better. And
mhm,
I think it was like, I started, I think I took on a little bit angrier of a persona, and too angry,
uh-huh,
like not believable, not what I'm
yeah,
doing now, but
right,
too angry. But it helped me. It wasn't that thing where I'm like, please laugh at me. So I was took on this angrier thing, and I found a
uh-huh,
rhythm, and I found, I had some pretty, consistent material. And then, I got to be the second guy for a while.
mhm,
I was still working, but my friend up in Dayton, Ohio, Lisa Grigsby, owned this comedy club, and she was like, "Hey, we're going to move you up to the feature. You're going to do 30 minutes. You don't have to be first." And I had a couple really good sets. A memorable one was I worked with Kevin Pollak, who was, it's not that long after he had done A Few Good Men, and he decided to go back to stand up for a while
mhm,
on the weekends. And there was a sold out crowd, and I was the second guy. And, Kevin was cool to me. He liked me. He's like,
mhm,
hey, and he didn't know that I was just a part timer. And he was like, I kind of told him, and he's like, yeah, man, you could do this. You could do this, and
yeah,
it meant a lot. So, not too long after that, I quit my day job and I went on the road as a feature. That's, as the second guy. And that's back
mhm,
2001, 2002. That's when you could go on the road for 50 weeks if you were any good and knew some people and
mhm,
feature, and they'd give you a
right,
place to stay, not much money
mhm,
at all, but you could work. And I worked that whole year. And, I got good at the audience makes noise after every time I say,
yeah.
like I got good at, like, I say this thing and they laugh, I say this thing, they laugh. And, and then I talked to a couple buddies of mine that were better comics. And, I think I got like, I was trying to kill and not trying to be funny. And there's a difference.
Yeah,
And I think I started to see, okay, um, now that I'm not terrified of not getting a laugh. And that's a long process of
it is,
like
yeah,
most people are up there just terrified of, like I have some guys that friends of mine that sometimes I'm unreasonable with them because I forget, man, they're still in that place where it's like they're afraid that things are going to go horrible,
yeah,
and so eventually you sort of get to like, man, I'm pretty confident every time I do 30 minutes that they're going to probably laugh,
mhm,
and then it starts to get a little stale, and you're going more for the laugh than you are. You're going more for the noise, just make them make some sort of noise than you are say something that's funny.
yeah,
Um, and I started to dial back and be like, okay, now what can I say that's different than other people are saying?
mhm,
What can I say that's personal? What point can I make that other people aren't making, or can I make it in a way that's different than other people are making it? And that's when I think you start experiencing growth. And every now and then you take a few steps back there because you're like, wow, I could kill, but I want to do this thing that I think is better. And it takes a while to make that funny. And then, that probably some of that got mixed in where I had some roots in Houston, Texas. That was my first sales territory. And there was some
Mhm.
pretty cool stuff going on in the comedy community down there. There's a guy that owned this club, the Laugh Stop. His name was Mark Babbitt. And he was one of the first supporters of Mitch Hedberg and Dave Attell. And there was a scene
Mm.
down there, and they
Mm.
kind of had their eye on what was going on in Hollywood, and what was going on with really good comedy. So I would sort of go down there every few months during that first year and just like hang for 2 weeks, do a little work, hang out, do the open mic, and just sort of check to see, hey, is this stuff that I'm doing, does it resonate with the people that are a little hipper?
Mhm.
And so uh am I not out here just trying to get laughs with dumb stuff? And that
Yeah.
was kind of a nice little barometer. And I about a year or two in, I got a couple of breaks where like I got to
Uh-huh.
go to the Montreal Comedy Festival, and I got a manager, and a couple TV credits, and then it was just all that stuff. It shouldn't matter, but that gives you a little more confidence. Like, hey, man,
Yeah.
I'm kind of what I'm doing. People are seeing there's something to it, and then you just start feeling a little freer to do what you want to do.
Mhm. And you appeal to just about everybody. Uh, and I compare you like to like a Nate Bargatze.
Yeah, he's great, man. He's
I
really good.
I've gotten to see him 3 times, 2 or 3 times, and it's amazing to see the audience because it's anywhere from 10-year-old kids, and, all the way up to my age people with ponytails and all. It's just a big, you got bikers and just a
Yeah.
big cornucopia of different people. And it seems like your audience is the same, that you can appeal to young, old, and everybody in between.
Yeah, that's first of all, Nate's, he's a friend. We got to know each other in New York a little bit. I mean, he's real good. Really, really good, and a good guy. And yeah, I mean, I've tried to write fairly universally. I think for a long time, we're like, I want this to go on TV, and
Mhm.
and so I'd like it to appeal to most people. And yeah, maybe the makeup of our audience it's a similar cross section. I can assure you that Nate's cross section is much bigger than mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nate's doing
Uh,
pretty. Nate's doing real well for himself, man. And
yeah.
it's well deserved. He's a great comic.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And, it it just it seems to me that you would have a similar type of fan base. But what was it that, made you what was the first realization that you had that you wanted to entertain that broader, fan base and maybe not, uh say fuck as much or whatever.
Oh,
What was it that made you
you're
decide,
saying
"Hey, I'm gonna do that?"
specifically be cleaner.
Yeah.
Um, so I never wrote dirty. Yeah, actually early on I was probably a little dirty, and the
Mhm,
content. And then there was a period when I was saying fuck way too much on the road,
mhm,
and then I started to sort of feel like um I want to be on TV, and what's the
mhm,
point of writing this joke when it can't be on TV? I would like to be on, some TV.
mhm.
So that was purely a sort of strategic move to start getting some of the profanity out of it. And then I got older, and I think I just started feeling like it was unnecessary, and it was, you know, and I'm not that guy. I mean, you'll hear me say it plenty during, off stage. And you'll hear it even in a club show once in a while. But I
Yeah,
started feeling like, uh, if I put something out, I'd like it to be clean,
yeah,
and then, I had sort of a really important thing. Like maybe 6 years ago, um, I was working on a new chunk of material, and I called Jack Vaughn, who had I told you he went to Sirius XM at the time. He
Mhm.
took the job at Sirius XM Comedy, and Sirius XM has been a huge supporter of mine. It's been,
Mhm.
the really, them and the Bob and Tom show have been there for me the whole time, and a couple
Yeah.
other radio shows across the country. But those two, it's where a lot of people know me from. So I called Jack and I said, "Hey, I got this new block of material, and he always had good advice. He
Mhm.
always had pretty good advice on, how to shape the next album." And I didn't, man, I got like 2 sentences in, and Jack was like, "Hey man, can you make it clean, like G-rated?" And I was like, I've
Uh-huh.
never been like G-rated. And he's like, you know, I'm sort of reshaping this channel, Laugh USA, and we need more G-rated material. He goes, make it G-rated. And he sent me some, some guidelines, and they were, strict. And I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I can do this. And I was like, hey, what if I do? He goes, I'm looking for stuff now. And I was like, well, I haven't been played on this channel much. What if I, make this album that's half brand new stuff that's G-rated, and then I pull
Mhm.
some of the old stuff in and make sure that's G-rated. He's like, yeah, do it. It's like, hasn't played on this channel. And that's what
Uh-huh.
Fish Sandwich, that was Fish Sandwich, the album. And, I really haven't looked back. Like I don't
Mhm.
think I'll put anything out anymore that, isn't G-rated. And
Mhm.
some people mistakenly think, they're like, oh, people's favorite thing to do is like, well, that's, it's a higher form of comedy. I'm like, no, I don't think that at all. It's what Jack says was, you're way too close to being all the way clean to not be all the way clean. Like at the
Uh-huh.
time I was like real close to being G-rated, just doing what I was doing. And it's like, make 5 adjustments and you're there. And I think I
Yeah.
was either too scared or too lazy to make those 5 adjustments, and I made them. And now that's where I am. Now, that being said, there's a lot of guys that are filthy that I think are geniuses,
Yeah.
and
Right.
that I would pay to go watch. It's just not my style. I think now it doesn't come out of my mouth as naturally. Um, if you came to a club show, you know, don't expect to totally see G-rated material. It will be the material itself, the subject matter will not be offensive. It'll be normally what I do. But every now and then, especially when I'm developing something, you'll hear, you'll hear me say something profane, not very often,
Yeah.
and at some point, maybe I'll get to where I just never say it anywhere on stage. But
Yeah.
sometimes I like to be, yeah, this is a club show. It's a little different than, yeah. So, that's kind of how I got there. I never, and if what you mean by broad audience is clean, yes. As far as like appealing to a broad audience, like I never made that never made that decision when it came to, other than be clean. And, I really don't talk about anything political.
Yeah.
Um, and again, there's some comics that I really like that do.
Mhm.
And I have opinions. I just have always, it's never been something that I've been, I'm not the guy that's wants to talk politics all the time off stage. I'm not the guy
Right.
that's, I read the paper. I have some opinions, but these days I feel like, man, when they come to the comedy club to see me, um, I'd rather let's just forget about all that,
Yeah.
during this show for a while. I'd rather somebody didn't get up and walk out of the show. I'll give you an analogy, and I'm getting way off point here, but like I remember when I was in Houston, Texas. I just moved down there for, it was my first job. I was in that sales store. When you're in sales, you're driving around all the time. And
Yeah.
I used to listen to sports radio show all the time. And I was really into sports radio,
Mhm.
and I love this guy. And just little by little, he started talking more and more about politics. And it was not at all the politics that I agreed with.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, man, I didn't come here for this. Like I can go down the dial and get this was a respite. This is
Yeah.
this is like,
Yeah.
I'm supposed to have a vacation from that, and we don't have to fight here. Now I got to get mad on your sports show about something that has nothing to do with sports, you know? And I sort of feel like my comedy shows are like that, for
Yeah.
whatever reason, that all this, if somebody knows me, from all the stuff I've put out over the last several years, it's not because I lean one way or the other politically. So if I just start saying that, it's like, man, we didn't come here for this.
Mhm.
Now half the audience, based on the way our country is, half the audience is going to be upset, and I would
Yep.
rather not have that.
Right.
Sometimes I'm like, you're a coward. You should talk about what you feel, and then, I challenge myself every now and then, but I kind of still wind up with like, it's probably just not who I'm going to be on
Yeah.
stage.
And the end goal is to be funny. I mean, that's and some people reach funny by being political, like a
Yeah,
Lewis
yeah.
Black or
Some
something.
people,
That's their bent, and they're good at it. And
they're real good at it.
I feel the same as you because I cannot, I've got more R-rated material and tried it, and it just doesn't work for me. I don't look
Yeah.
like the type of guy that would say that. I look like a high school history teacher, and it just doesn't work,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I think that, yeah.
it doesn't feel natural.
Yeah. I think now also and sometimes when I'm saying it, it comes out, but then I look at myself on tape and I'm like, you don't look like that guy anymore.
Yeah,
Um, every now and then I do think it works, and it's like, I don't think it's offensive,
yeah,
and I think, like, my friend Kathleen Madigan, you're familiar with Kathleen?
yeah.
She's one of
Oh
the
yeah,
best. And Kathleen, everybody's gonna say, I was tease her about this. She's like, "Oh, Kathleen, she's great. She's clean. She's really clean." I'm like, she's not that clean.
yeah,
She's clean. Like, she'll drop an F bomb here and there, and it's beautiful, and
yeah.
nobody's offended by it. And I kind of like, again, she's, for what I put out on a CD or on a special, it's probably never going to be that. But when
Uh-huh.
I'm at a club show, I could tell, like, man, nobody's offended. I drop one or two,
Mm,
and I don't think anybody's offended by this.
yeah.
I really don't.
Now, you've got this squeaky, squeaky clean material and you go to Drybar. Did you have to dial anything down because Drybar makes G look like
No,
uh,
I don't think so,
R
because
sometimes?
I think Laugh USA, which is kind of what I write for, which is
Uh-huh.
a popular serious station. I think their standards are very similar
Uh-huh.
to Drybar. The only, like, little difference, the only thing I was conscious of was, Drybar originally was a Mormon company.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are some things about, like, Mormons really don't like you making fun of the institution of marriage.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think I might have had a joke or two in there. I was like, they may go the wrong way with that one. But I sent it to
Hmm.
my buddy who, like, kind of runs the thing and was a Mormon. He's like, they're fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Like,
Hmm.
he's like, don't worry about that. But yeah, that was the only thing that I really, and I've learned, I do some corporate stuff now, and it's nice. It's usually a nice payday, and some of them are really fun gigs. But when I was younger, I would do, I was pretty, you know, PG-17. I was profane, but I could clean it up. And that they'd do, hey, you want to do this gig, this corporate gig? And I'd be like, sure. And when you're trying to switch in the middle of a thing, there's a hitch in your delivery that ruins a lot. I mean, you think
Right.
it's just that hitch ruins everything. And
Yeah.
now when you write clean and you just sort of, it's already clean, it's so fun to just go do it. And it's like, no, I just do what I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's nice. Again, I really don't like to overvalue it artistically, where it's like, I don't think it's a more pure way, or a better way. It's my way.
Uh-huh.
Again, there's some comics like Lewis Black, man. Yeah, Lewis. He's not filthy, but he's very profane, and he's
Yeah.
great. I
Mm.
mean, there's Dave Attell is a genius. He is a genius.
Mhm.
And he's not clean.
Yeah.
So, um, probably one of the first comics I saw, like, that I liked, was Eddie Murphy. He wasn't
Uh-huh.
clean.
Right. Yeah. Thinking about the business part, because I know that Sirius getting involved with Sirius XM is like one of the best things for comics because they actually take care of the artist,
Yeah.
make sure you get paid properly and all that, whereas everything else pretty much just screws you out of money, and it's really refreshing to see that. But thinking about business, you had where the field corn grows on Amazon for a while, and then you also put it on YouTube. And I know that was a conscious decision. What where do you get the timing, and where do what does YouTube do for you that Amazon didn't?
Um, I think first of all, the 800-pound gorilla is my record label, and I kind of let them make a lot of these decisions. They produced
Mm,
where the field corn grows. They
mhm,
produced Fish Sandwich, and I sort of there's some smart people over there that know what they're doing, and I
yeah.
sort of trust them when it comes to this. And we kind of decided, hey, let's leave it on a streaming service on Amazon for a year,
Mhm,
and then after a year, probably the most people that wanted to see it there are going to see it. And it's still up there. It's not like it's
mhm,
not there,
right.
but let's open it up a little bit more. And I think most comedy specials, other than maybe the stuff that's on Netflix, eventually it gets to YouTube. And I just think it's,
Mhm.
it gets more eyes on it, hopefully.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, and
it's
it's fairly recent that went on YouTube, and
yeah,
it's
yeah, just
over
maybe a
it's
couple months ago.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's over 500,000 already, so it's,
Oh, that's good.
doing really good. Thinking about so I'm just about to take an hour of your time, so, there's one question I ask everybody, and, I've cut it down because nobody wants to talk about the worst advice they got, but, what's the best advice you got from anybody when you were coming up in comedy?
Um, I think there's probably a lot of stuff, but the one that really I remember is this guy named Ron Morey, who's one of the funniest comics I know. This guy out of Phoenix, and he gave me two pieces of advice. One, we were at the last stop in Houston, and we were like screwing around in the green room, or in the bar, and
Mhm.
we used to do impressions of this guy that was a club owner in Columbia, Missouri, and I could do him. This guy named Freddie DeMarco, and I'm like, "Hey, Ron, what are you doing? I mean, come on, Ron, you're killing me. Why are you busting my balls like this, Ron?" And Ron just loved it. And Ron's like, "Hey, man, you should do more of that on stage. Like, that's where you're really funny, is in these characters. You should try to do that on stage."
Uh-huh.
And then this comedian Felicia Michaels I worked with, who was
Yeah, I know
really
her.
nice lady, and I opened for her, and she was like, "Hey, I was doing like impressions, like celebrity impressions, and they were
Mhm.
horrible." She was like, "Do more characters than impressions," and I listened to her. And then Ron also told me, listen to your act while you're doing something else. He was like, tape yourself. And back then it was, you just do a cassette tape, a
Mhm.
Walkman type thing. He's like, tape yourself, and then, listen to it while you're doing the dishes, or listen to it while you're driving, or listen to it while you're doing, something, folding laundry. Don't like be so dialed in that you're, just kind of have it as background.
Mhm.
And you'll start to make subtle adjustments to how you deliver material.
Mhm.
And it was great advice. And I really try to, when young comics want to know, like, I'm like, Dad, listen around, man. That was one of the best pieces of advice I ever got.
Yeah, that's really good, and never thought about it that way, and it's always hard to listen back to yourself anyway, and
Well,
but, if you put it in the background, then the highlights are gonna hit you at least subliminally.
also, I think it's after a while, believe it or not, Scott, it's not hard to listen to yourself.
Yeah.
If you do it enough. Because I'm as critical, and I have hangups, and just I'm insecure as everybody, and I'm not sure I can watch myself as much, especially now
Yeah.
that I'm getting older. But um, listening, I have no problem doing it now. I enjoy it, and here's what I'll. You ever been walking through the back of a comedy club, and your buddy's on stage, and you're just going to the kitchen, and he says something, and you immediately know how to fix that joke? You're
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're like,
Yeah.
oh, you just get rid of that word, and switch these two, and you can do that.
Yeah.
Well, and then you listen to your own joke, your own in your work. God, do I sound like that? This is terrible. I should be better than this. I quit my job and I'm this bad, or
Yeah.
am I that nasally? Why am I that? Like,
Yeah.
you're too hung up on yourself, so you don't make But if you hear yourself enough, like you just hear yourself in the background when you're washing dishes, and then you do it, at the coffee shop when you actually are paying attention to every word you're saying. You just hear it every day. Eventually, you're just listening to another comic. Like the guy you're listening to is you, but you have the same effect as when you're just walking through the back of the comedy club. So you hear yourself as just another comic, and you're like, I know how to fix that thing. You just get rid of that thing and that thing and that thing, and you're going too fast right there. Slow that down. And I would, if you have a problem listening to yourself, or if any comic does, lean into it and just keep listening. Just keep listening and try to do it at different times and different places. And again, sometimes pay a lot of attention to it. Sometimes it's just background noise.
Right.
And I think I heard this secondhand, but I know Brian Regan writes that way a lot. Basically just listening to his act, and is like, he's like, oh, let's see if we can make that bit a little bigger. Oh, I have an idea on how to make that, how to say another thing about that thing.
Yeah.
I think comedy's like, it's just constant, take a premise and, it gets bigger, go wide with it. Let's try to get everything we can. And then you start narrowing it down and narrow it down. Let's get it down to only the stuff that's funny. And now you're down to like 3 funny lines. And you're like, let's see if we can go wide again and pick up some more stuff. Let's take it out. Let's take it way wide again. And you're like, all right, I picked up all this. Now let's chop some of that stuff off. And then a branch of it you want to go wide with and chop some of that stuff off.
Yeah. I'm experiencing that right now. I've been doing it for about 5 years, and I'm starting to see I've done that. I've taken it down, and I'm like, oh, now I can get 3 more tags off of this.
Yeah, it's in it, man. In 5 years, I think I think 5 years, and these rules, you're like, comedians take this literally, like, well, it's 5 years, but I feel like right around 5 years is when you're like, okay, I'm not terrified of being on stage anymore. And I'm usually, I'm going to get some laughs. I kind of know how to get laughs. And when I don't, I know what I did wrong, or I know I think it's a really fun, if you can make most guys, most comics just drop out by 5, it's probably 90% attrition rate, because those first 5 years are brutal, and life gets in the way. But if you can make it to 5, I think now you can start thinking about, okay, now I'm going to say what I want to say. I'm going to start being myself on stage. And then 10, I think, is when you kind of, that's another level. You're like, I think now I'm kind of myself, and now I can really get in, I think it's another level. But 5 is a good, I think 5, it was like a landmark time for me,
Yeah, it does feel like getting over a hump. I mean, your first 3 years, you're just non-funny, and then you start to develop your voice, and then 5 is, I feel like I know what I want my act to look like now. So
in those first 3 years, you are funny at times. You're very funny at times.
Oh,
Sometimes it's like the job of being a comedian is not just to be funny, it's being able to replicate being funny. It's like, I did that. Now, can I do that always? I said that thing that way and it laughed. Now, how can I say it 500 more times and get, get in and be positive that's going to get a laugh, And now I'm taking away some of the mystery and the art of comedy, but it is. I mean, most of the stuff that they say has been said before, and it's
It starts out as a big rock, and you got to just chisel away till you get to the good stuff. Yeah. Well, I certainly appreciate you doing the show.
I enjoyed it, man.
You don't do a ton of podcasts. I started looking at. You did breaking down bits, and then a couple of. I just listened to one. I can't remember. It's the stupid people one.
Is it the Sklar Brothers?
I think it is.
Dumb people. Those guys are. I mean, those are. I've done that. That's one of my favorite podcasts. Is the Sklar Brothers podcast. It's a Dumbtown, I think it is. Dumb People Town. That is a great. And then Jimmy Pardo. I've done his a couple times. That's a great podcast. And then there's Chick McGee had a great podcast for a long time. I don't think he does it that much anymore. That's a great one. And then Rock the Cash Bar are these comics out of St. Louis, or I'm sorry, out of Houston, that talk about music. And those guys that's a really fun podcast.
Yeah. Did you ever get to work with Jeff Oskey?
Oh, yeah, he's great, man. God, that guy's
Oh, man.
funny. Yeah, he's
He
really
was a guest a
God,
couple
that guy's
episodes
funny, man.
ago,
Yeah, he's
and
so good, man.
I, you know, that what the failed to mention news that he's doing on
Yeah,
Bob and Tom
that's
now,
good.
it's just one of those things, every time one comes up, I save it for right before my wife and I go to sleep, and I
Yeah,
say, "We gotta watch this," and
he's good,
it
man.
takes
Josuke's
takes all the
really
stress out.
yeah, it's really good, and I think he's kinda found his thing there, man.
Yeah.
He's a funny dude, man.
Yeah, yeah, he really is. Well, it's been great having you on. If folks want to see where you're at and what you're doing and all the fun socials, where do they find you at?
That's gregwarrencomedy.com.
All right. GregWarrenComedy.com. That's you. I had a rough day. Anywho, thank you so much for being on the show. And you know, I learned a lot, and like I said, you're one of those guys I can watch and not be taken out of it trying to criticize your stuff or trying to uh, uh, take good things from your show and apply it to mine, except for screw you for doing plantar fasciitis first because it was
There's
going to be
probably
my bit.
there's more to be said about it, man. There's more to be said about that.
It was gonna be my bet, but now I
Well,
do vape.
I'm sure you probably have an angle on it that I don't have. So yeah,
Yeah,
don't.
no, I don't. It was so similar. It was like almost parallel thinking, so I gotta redo it if I ever do it, or I just won't. I'll feel like I'm stealing Greg Warren's stuff. But anyhow, thanks for being on the show. You were a great guest, and I love your stuff. I can't wait till the sales stuff comes out.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
gonna be a great album. I'm or a great special. I'm really looking forward to that.
Well, thanks, God. I enjoyed talking with you, man. Thanks for having me.